Good evening all, and welcome. Just before the video begins, I'd like to give a gentle reminder that I have an offer live on Patreon. If you join the Emerald tier or above, you get everything you see on screen, which includes an additional 2 power tokens, as well as an exclusive letter from me, handwritten. So that's what you've got to look forward to, on top of all the other prizes that you will receive for signing up. It would mean the world to me, and really does help keep me going in these difficult times. But again, entirely optional. If you're interested, the link can be found in the description, and I would appreciate it more than you know. But without further ado, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. In 2013, I moved into an apartment in Alma, Arkansas. I'm not sure if this had anything to do with it, but the apartment complex was right next to a very old graveyard. A little history on this apartment complex. I had lived there 3 times before: 2003, 2006, and 2009. Each time I got the same 1-bedroom apartment, number 208. It was always the only 1-bedroom available. Each time, I would have strange things happen there. The first time cabinets would open, things would be in different places, and sometimes when I'd take a shower and close my eyes, I'd see the bathroom and shower covered in blood, and blood coming out the shower. I'd open my eyes, and it would be normal. The first time I lived there, that stuff intrigued me. I only moved out to move in with my girlfriend. Alma has very few options for apartments, and in 2006, when my girlfriend and I split up, I had to go back to the same apartment complex, and lo and behold, the exact same day I split with my girlfriend, the people living in 208 suddenly move out, and for the second time, I got the same apartment. It seemed a little weird, but I just wrote it off as a coincidence. This time, things were worse. I'd hear movements in my walk-in wardrobe and living room at night. The shower visions were more intense, and also while I was living here, did I get sleep paralysis. My first sleep paralysis episode was terrifying. I was laying asleep on the ground next to my new girlfriend, and at about 1 AM, I heard a DVD rack in the living room fall, and a lot of DVDs crashing to the floor. I was still half asleep when I looked towards my bedroom door, which I kept shut, and on this night, I had accidentally left my bathroom light on, and I could see the light right under the doors, but as I turned my head to the direction of the noise, and was about to holler out who's there, I hear running footsteps, like a kid. Then I saw the shadow of feet at the base of my bedroom door, in the bathroom light. No filler shadow, just the feet, and in a blink of an eye they moved from the door to my chest and disappeared. This all happened so fast, and I couldn't move or speak. But after seeing the shadow feet on my chest, I went to shake my girlfriend awake, but my arms couldn't move. So I say her name, but I couldn't speak. So in panic I try and sit up, but couldn't move at all. My eyes began to get heavy, and in a second I was dreaming of a shadow holding me down, covering my mouth. I fought and widened my eyes, and it was still there. I'm finally able to make noise, but it's just a raspy, pitiful help that is barely a whisper, and I'm able to slightly move my finger and touch my girlfriend. It's enough, and she opens her eyes and asks me what's wrong. I let out my pitiful help again as I widen my eyes in fear at my chest. My girlfriend starts shaking me, and when I don't respond, she slaps me. In an instant, the shadow is gone, and I'm awake and able to move. My girlfriend says she never heard the DVDs crashing, and did not see the shadow. The DVDs were all still on the rack when I go to check the living room. My girlfriend witnessed and pulled me out of 3 more sleep paralysis episodes over the next few months, before leaving me because it freaked her out so badly. And then I moved out. Fast forward to 2009. I had married in 2007 and had a son that same year and a daughter in 2009. But my wife and I split, and I needed a place to stay, and once again had to go back to the same apartment complex. I couldn't afford anything better. Once again, for the 3rd time, the only apartment available is 208. But I didn't want to be homeless, so I asked the landlord if I could move into 208, and if it could be temporary. If another apartment opens up, he'll let it to me. He says yes, and I move in. But after 2 weeks of bloody visions, noises, and 2 more sleep paralysis episodes, I move out and stay with family. My wife and I got back together in 2013. We split for good and got split custody, and I needed a local place to live. And because this time I needed a 2-bedroom apartment, and knowing there is no chance of getting 208 because it's 1 bedroom, I go back to the complex and ended up getting 210, which is right next to 208. The even number apartments are on the 2nd floor, the odd on the bottom. 210 was the only available 2-bedroom apartment, so I take it and tell myself at least it's not 208. Nothing happened. At first, my kids and I really make it our home, and then it begins. One night I'm in my room and it's 2:30 in the morning, and I hear my kids banging toys around and giggling in their room, and I heard the TV come on and it wakes me up. Irritated, I call out, "You guys are supposed to be asleep. Don't make me ground you." The banging and giggling stops, but I still hear the TV going, and I get up and walk to their shut doors, still half asleep, and say, "Okay kiddos, I told you to go back to..." As I begin opening their door, it occurs to me that my kids are at their mum's. I had taken them back to her the evening before. A chill runs down my body as I slowly push the door open and see toys strewn all about and cartoons playing on TV. I turn the lights on, unplug the TV, and then bolt to the living room, shutting their door behind me. I turned all the lights on in the apartment and sat up on edge all night. Nothing else happens, but the next week, while my kids were there, I'd catch my 3-year-old daughter talking to somebody when my 6-year-old son wasn't around her. So I asked her who she talked to, and she replied, "My friend's old mum. Her kid got burned up, so she's nice to me because I look like her little girl." My daughter said this word for word, and usually she couldn't talk that plain. I immediately called her mum and asked her who'd she been having watch over them, but she says that it's just cartoons. I once again got a chill down my entire body. My son never saw what Alexis saw. Over the next few months, my little girl continued to talk about old mum, sometimes even pointing behind me telling me she's watching me to make sure I'm a good daddy. Very creepy. Over the past few years, my little girl has gotten to like spooky stuff and is fascinated with scary shows and movies. But at this time she was only 3 and had never even seen scary stuff, so I was really getting concerned and had a hard time sleeping. Then one night, I was reading a kid's book called The Monster in My Closet to my kids. They lay in bed as I was sitting in the chair next to the bed, and at the end of the book is a page that says for the kid reading to draw the monster in their closet. This gave me an idea. I told my daughter to draw the old mum for me. She sits up, I give her a pencil and the book, and she says, "Can you move, Daddy? She's behind you and I can't see her." I scoot away a little, and my girl looks in the direction where I sat before, then looks down, draws a little, looks up again, then draws some more, and continues to do this until she finishes. She hands me the picture. I look at it, and I begin to tremble and my heart races. That weekend, we moved to an apartment in the next town over. Some might say it was her imagination and she just made up the drawing. But she was 3, and I believe if she made it up, she wouldn't have taken her eyes off the paper as she drew it. But she kept looking up as she drew, and that tells me she was looking at old Mum while drawing her, in order to reference. Now that you can see the drawing, you will understand why we moved. My sister has 3 kids. I don't have any. Which means that I absolutely love being the auntie that spoils her nieces and nephews. Her newest addition is called Kaylee. She's 3 and is an absolute sweetheart. They recently moved into this bungalow in the middle of the woods. It is absolutely massive, and I do love their property. But one of the things that unnerves me is that the house has this eerie vibe. I felt that way for a while about it. Anyway, on to the story. I love Kaylee. She is such a sweetheart. But sometimes she comes out with the strangest things. I was once staying over babysitting the 3 kids while her and her husband had some quality time alone at the cinema. We were just hanging out, and out of nowhere, Kaylee waddles into the room. I ask her if everything's alright, and she points up to the very high ceiling and says, "The man's watching me." "What, Kaylee?" I look up, and there's no man. Remember how I said this is a bungalow? It's flat. There's no upstairs, just high ceilings. Did a balloon get up there? I look again, and there's nothing. "Kaylee, sweetheart, you're imagining things. There's nothing there." This is where the inner 3-year-old comes out, and she gets angry. "No, you're not looking, Auntie. He's right there." I look up again, and still can't see anything. Then she looks up, as if whatever she can see is talking to her, nods her head, and walks out. I ask Kaylee where she's going, and she just screams, she's got to find the rope. At this point, I was very concerned. I run after her and ask her where the hell she thinks she's going. She was going into her dad's workshop to look for some rope. When I ask her why, she says she doesn't know, but the man wants it and that he needs the rope now. I had just about had it at this point. I was very creeped out, and those 3 kids had an early bedtime for sure. I didn't babysit for a while, and the husband found the house far too eerie, and they moved out shortly after. This happened to me when I was about 5. I don't actually remember it, but it's what my mum told me, and she isn't the kind of person to lie about things, especially when she's only telling them to me and has no one to impress, so I'm gonna take it as truth. Allegedly, when I was 3, I would walk around the house naked. This started out of nowhere, and when asked by my mother why I was doing this, I would apparently always reply, "Because that's how the lady does it." My mum didn't really understand, but kind of brushed it off. There were a few times when I'd wake up screaming in the middle of the night. Apparently, I'd say that the lady had come to pay a visit. My mother tried ruling it out as just a night terrors and me fixating on an imaginary character, and thought nothing more of it. It wasn't until a few years later, with these events still persisting, that a neighbour from the area got friendly with my mum. They came round, and out of nowhere the conversation turned to this house's history, as of course my mother was quite interested, having lived in here a few years. The neighbour told her a story, that there was a woman before that lived in this house about 30 years ago. Allegedly, she committed arson in several places around town, and when she thought she was being found out, she burnt herself alive in the garden. However, while she was on fire, she realized it was a bad idea and ran into the house, smacked things over her face and eyes to try and put the flame out, and blinded herself. She managed to get the fires out, but she was blind. The burns were so gnarly though that she ended up dying a few days later in hospital because of complications. Funny thing is, they never found out it was her. It was all in her mind that she thought that they were finding her out. The house was put up for sale, and the lady said that it had been sold countless times, but people had never stayed here as long as we had, and she found it incredibly fascinating and didn't know why they left, that maybe it left a dark aura. That's when it all clicked with my mum. My mum then summoned me into the room. "Hayley, honey, come here." I entered. "Tell me about that lady that you used to see." "The lady who has the black eyes and face?" "Yeah, that one. What does she look like?" "Her whole body is black, and she smells funny." That is all I said, until I wandered away. My mum and the woman were left absolutely stunned. It all added up. Was I seeing the ghost of this dead lady? I always enjoy sharing this scary story because it's so weird. When I was 6 to 8, I would always have nightmares of a little boy sitting on the edge of my bed crying, asking me if I knew where his mother was. Obviously, being a kid with no brains, I tried to console him, but it never worked. Fast forward 3 years, my brother is around the same age, and he starts having the dream/nightmare/visit from Satan incarnate. Same boy, same foot of the bed, and crying. My mum chalks it up as imaginary friends. Me telling him what happened, and he wants it to happen to be like his big brother. Again, 3 years later, fast forward to my baby cousin, now roughly 6 or 7. He's sleeping over with my little brother. After playing video games and trading Pokemon cards all night, they decide to hit the hay. My little brother is sleeping in my room, and my cousin in my little brother's room, all to himself. My cousin wakes up in the morning and asks us if we saw the little kid crying for his mother. So first, a little background. I'm a 25-year-old mother of 2 wonderful kids, a boy who's 5, a girl who's 2, and a very smart stepson who's 8. It's mainly about my son, the 5-year-old CJ, and my stepson Liam. Just so you know a little bit about CJ, he's a very hyper and imaginative boy. He's not great with books or writing and has a speech delay, but very great with motor skills and figuring things out. Now, since CJ was a baby, he's done some odd things, to which I have never looked much into. The first thing was night terrors as a baby. I guess they're common, but my mother, husband and I found them weird, because what could a baby be afraid of? He would scream in his sleep, but wake up and be just fine. Now fast forward to when he was 2. He would use toy guns and clear rooms in a way police or military would. I never thought much about it, but my husband, being ex-military and now law enforcement, would watch him and notice how he would do it so accurately that it was puzzling. Then when he was about 3 or 4, he would complain about the monsters during the day and at night. Common things I knew, but he would point to empty closets or corners of rooms and say, "Scary," or "Monster," or "Scary hand get me," or "He's dark." Even once when he was 4, he grabbed a Bible and went through the closet and say, "We need to exercise." But again, I guess a common thing kids have because of the big imaginations. Now fast forward to a few days ago. My husband and the kids and I are driving to Walmart to get things for our daughter's 2nd birthday. When we pass an ambulance, then out of the blue CJ says, "Grandma's dead," which puzzled us, and we asked him what he said. He repeated, Grandma's dead. So we ask, Grandma B or Grandma K? No, Liam's grandma, he says. So we laughed and Liam says, your grandma is my grandma, and we just laughed the whole thing off. Then about 30 minutes later, Liam's mum calls him and tells him, your stepdad's grandma died. To which he was sad, and we tended to him. It wasn't until maybe an hour or so later I turned to my husband and say, oh my god, CJ predicted that. To which we were freaked out a bit. I don't know maybe if it's a coincidence. Kids say odd things, but it's hard to deny the odd things that seem to happen around my son. My friend's daughter is pretty messed up. She's 7 and she is very much into horror movies. I think it's fair to say I don't like the child. I tolerate her. I regularly foster kittens, and last summer I fostered 2 litters. I invited them over to check out the kittens, who were not a month old. My friend's daughter promptly exclaims upon seeing them, "Kittens, how cute!" smiling wide with the typical flair and enthusiasm you would expect from a 7-year-old girl. She immediately scoops one by the neck, turns to me and says, "May I kill it?" grinning like the Joker just got to shoot Batman's parents. I promptly asked them to leave. I was about 2, and all I said was random stuff. One day I was twisting my ear, as I have pretty flexible ears, so I can twist them a lot without hurting them, and my mother asked me why I was doing that, because her father had a habit of doing that too. My answer to that question was, because I'm your father. Now it might not seem so creepy after all, but my grandfather died a long time before I was born, so in no way could I have picked that up from him. Needless to say, she was kind of freaked out. I was a counsellor at a summer camp for inner city kids. Because we had the youngest group, and because of the culture shock, as camp was in a rural area, we had 4 counsellors for every bunk of about 20 kids. One night at around midnight, we were all playing poker while the kids were sleeping, and then one of the kids, Brian, pops up and starts whimpering. We go over and ask what's wrong, assuming that Brian had a nightmare, when he points at the far corner of the bunk and says, "There are little people there." We asked him what he meant, but all we got out of him was that there were little people and that they were watching us. He was so insistent on the point that we trained our flashlights onto the corner to prove to him that he was imagining things. Brian shouted, "There they are! They're moving out the light!" and he ducked his head under the covers. He went back to sleep in the same position a minute later. I guess he was so tired. Even fear couldn't prevent him from sleeping. We were all unnerved, especially our counsellor Damon, who had his bed nearest the corner, who basically said, "Well, now I don't want to sleep." My friend Chad said, "This is like one of those horror movies where the adults don't believe the kids, and then they all meet a very sticky end." Brian did this next night, but then he stopped and calmed down for the rest of the summer. As far as I know, no little people showed up. There was this kid in my high school a couple of years ago, and I followed him on Instagram just because me and my friends thought he was hilarious and weird. He was awkward and hardly spoke with anyone. But anyway, he posted a picture of himself holding a BB replica and saying, "It's time to go to school." He got expelled because of that, but I was freaking out because I thought it was real, but we found out later it was only a BB. My daughter and younger sister and I are 9 hours away from home, visiting my dad for late Christmas. I was sitting in the family room with my sister and stepmom Angie. She was on a ladder that goes into the attic helping my dad run some speaker wire. My daughter was around the corner playing in the closet. Things are quiet as my stepmom needed to be able to hear my dad give her instructions. All of a sudden, we hear my daughter giggle from the closet and yell, "Betty! Betty, what are you doing?" My stepmom comes off the ladder and half sprints towards me. Does Haven know anyone named Betty? She doesn't to my knowledge, and has never heard the name. I got up off the couch and walked over to where my daughter was playing. I crouched down and asked, "Who's Betty?" She's Betty. Grandma Betty. She's talking to Angie." We all freeze. No way. Betty is my stepmom's late mother, who passed away 5 years ago in December, and possibly the sweetest woman I've ever met. My daughter goes back to playing alone in the closet with Betty. We're all stunned. I think it's really cool, and it was kind of an emotional moment. I've always believed in the paranormal, and it makes me happy that it's being opened to my daughter. Has anyone else had their children seemingly converse with those who have passed? My mum's friend, who was a teacher, was threatened by a 7-year-old. We live in a country where gangs are a big problem, and the teacher worked in a public school in a dangerous zone. The teacher noticed there was something wrong with this girl. She wasn't as active as her classmates, so the teacher tried to reach her. After noticing the teacher's concern, the girl said something like, "What do you want? I've noticed you've been good to me, so what do you want from me? I know nothing is free in this life." After that, the girl told the teacher her parents were important gang members, some of her problems, and that she should piss off before she told her dad about the teacher's concern. For almost a year now, my daughter of 4 has been seeing unsettling things. It started out normal enough, I guess, her telling me she sees her friends in her toy room. I didn't think too much about it at first. Not too long after that, she tells me she doesn't like her friends anymore, and I asked her why. She tells me her friends don't have eyes. Pretty creeped out at this point, but sort of hoping it was something she just overheard somewhere or something. After this, she refused to be alone, even if her mother or myself were in the same room, but too far away. We had to basically be in arm's length at all times or she would freak out. If she woke up from a nap, she would just scream until we ran in there and got her, and she would cling on to us. More and more things started to happen. Things falling off her shelves, doors opening on their own, hearing footsteps in our attic. We ended up moving and things settled down, until recently. It started with her seeing shadows in our room. She's having very creepy and unexplainable nightmares. Doors are opening on their own again, and today she told me something that gave me goosebumps. I was helping her to use the bathroom, and she tells me that one time her mother had to go get toilet paper while she waited in the bathroom, but she wasn't alone because Lola was there. Right after telling me, she put her head down and stopped talking, almost like it slipped out. I asked her who Lola was and she didn't reply. I asked her again and she says no. I tell her it's okay and that she can tell me. All she would say is that Lola scares her. I try to pry any information out, but she just shuts down or tries to change the subject. I'm at a loss here. I'm very worried. One of the creepiest things she told her mother and I was that she had a dream she was outside looking into the woods. Someone came out and said to her, "Hey little girl, wanna get lost with me?" Creeped me out. Why would a 3-year-old dream of that? There was also another occasion a few days ago. She was in her bathtub with her younger brother. Her mum turned on the water and left. She said the water kept getting, and she kept putting it higher and higher. She couldn't turn it off herself. Then a boy came into the bathroom and he didn't help, but just watched. We recently moved. so I'm hoping this stuff would stop, but it seems like it's been following us. My daughter continues to do very spooky things. I'm sure there are rational explanations, and usually I figure out what they are, but this one stumped me. The other night, she proceeded to read my mind over and over. I picked her up from school, and we were walking by this vending machine where I often buy her a chocolate milk, but I didn't have any coins with me. When I looked at it, I thought that in my head, damn, I forgot my change. But she answered out loud, "That's okay." And when I said, "What?" she said, "It's okay you forgot to bring money. I'm not thirsty anyway." I figured it was just her head reading my body language or something. Maybe that time it was. In the car, she asked me about having a friend over, and before I could answer, she said, "Okay, another night when we're not so busy then." I think she answered as I was thinking, and not even said yet, "We've got a busy night with..." And I was just listing the things in my head as she interrupted me. When dinner was ready, she came downstairs the second it was ready without me needing to call her. We watched a movie, and I was getting hungry, and as I was thinking of a snack, she went and got me exactly what I was thinking of. It's not something I have often either, and she just guessed it. That's all I can remember, but there is more. I spent the entire night sure she could read my thoughts, but the next morning, everything returned to normal. I'm increasingly thinking there is something up with my daughter. She claims right now she's been hearing weird voices for the last few weeks. She can't understand what they're saying, but asked if I'm hearing them too. I asked her straight up, and she says she's not sure if they're real or in her head, but they don't scare her, and she thinks they're saying nice things. She asked me this morning on the way to school, which is what prompted me to write this. So, what I've seen have been 5 or 6 taps left running in different rooms in the house that I don't remember turning on, and that I don't remember being on when I left the room. Last one was this morning when I got out the shower and found it going. I thought I was finally losing my senses. My keys, wallet and ID and other stuff have been showing up all over the place. I always put it down in the same place, a drawer near the door when I come in. I found them literally all over the house. I don't think anyone is playing a trick on me, because I've even had them out searching to help me look a few times, and they complained about it. I found a block of cheese in the knife drawer. I thought I was just distracted and stupid and put it there, but I've started finding pantry things in the fridge, and fridge things in the pantry. Nothing quite as weird as the cheese, but a few things that went bad. I questioned the family at the time, and everyone denied it and was annoyed because I accused them. Lots of doors will randomly open and close when I remember them the other way. A lot of lights are on or off when I remember leaving them the other way as well. And when I'm home alone, it's really weird. I'm starting to question my sanity a bit. One night, our daughter came into our room and started banging on the door. I rush out, open the door, and ask her what's wrong. She's in tears, and says that the woman in her room won't go away. I quickly grab the baseball bat from behind the door, and sneak into the room, ready to batter whoever the hell this is. As I open the door, I search the room, and no one's there. I scream for my daughter and ask her where she last saw the lady, and she says under the bed. Sure enough, I peek, and there's no one. My daughter starts screaming upon entering her room, and is insisting that she's under her bed. My daughter starts freaking out, and tells me to hit her with the bat. I give a few hits to under the bed, but my daughter continues screaming, and says that she's angry and that she's behind me. At this point, I get all my family out, jump into the car, and go to my parents' house for the night. We come back the next morning, and my daughter says that the woman is gone. But then the same thing happens a week later. Safe to say, we decided to sell our house shortly after. No way I could live there after that. My mum is normally a pretty grounded person. She wouldn't believe in ghosts, however something happened involving me that really made her question her belief. When I was 3, my grandfather, Mum's dad, died. As a result, my mum and I moved into my grandma's house since she couldn't live alone. Now here's the thing, I never met my grandfather. I've never been to my grandma's house before either. Despite this, I knew things about my grandfather that I couldn't have known. For example, I started staring out the front window. When asked why, I said I was waiting for Grandpa. When my mum asked me how I knew when Grandpa would be back, I described his car, and by the time I'd moved in, his car was long gone. I never saw it, and it's not in any pictures either. I also sometimes would prevent my mum or grandma from sitting somewhere, saying that Grandpa was sitting there. He also had a favourite spot to sit in that I wouldn't let anyone sit in. Again, there's no way I could have known this. So this goes on for some time, and then my mum decides that she's going to try and communicate with her dad one night while alone. Basically saying she doesn't want him to talk to her through me. I guess it worked, because my episodes about my grandfather stopped after that. My mum told me something I said as a 3-year-old. I don't remember this, but my mum told me that when I turned 3 years old, I told her that I was originally a boy, and that I was hit by a train, and came back as a girl. This came out of nowhere, and I was so nonchalant about it. My mum said, "Jamie, you were never a boy, you're a little girl." My response was, "Yeah, I know, I'm a girl now." I only told her this once, and never brought it up again. My mum didn't really push or ask any specific questions because she was so creeped out, which I don't blame her for. But I wish I could have given more details about it, like what was the boy's name? I tried looking up any details about a boy being hit by a train in my area, but as of yet, haven't found anything. I used to nanny for this family that had 3 kids, 2 older girls and a boy of 3. The girls were normal, but the boy would only ever talk about the end. If we played with Legos, he would be sure to finish off his people and voice in this weird deep guttural sound as he described their individual demises. Play with the dog and he'd eventually talk about breaking its neck. Remember, 3-year-old. Colouring would just be him with black and red crayon filling in a whole page. He would whisper threats to his sisters, and if we read a book he would suggest finishing off characters. He was the most morbid child I'd ever met. I don't know where it came from since his parents were real hippy-dippy. I mean all organic eating, no TV watching, and in love with nature people. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. He either had gone through some serious trauma, or he was possessed. Either way, I quit shortly after, when they laughed off my concerns over his mindset. I had a dream a few weeks ago that my wife and I left our daughter with a caretaker overnight, who turned out to be a secret addict. We arrived to pick up our daughter, and the woman told us that she had blacked out and that our daughter must have wandered off. I took to the streets in blind, screaming panic to look for her. Civil order had broken down, of course, and there were people running everywhere in the streets. Total chaos. I have memories of horrific actions in this dream, and when I suddenly awoke breathless and still panicked, my wife asks me what was wrong. I told her I'd just had a really unpleasant dream, but I didn't want to conjure the horror for the mother of our child. A few moments later, our daughter comes paddling down the hall and into our room. She asked me something she's never asked me before. "Daddy, How was your dream? Well, honey, I had a pretty bad dream, but it's over now, I said. Then she replied with, It's okay, Daddy. I found a family. I had my lamb with me. I was safe. I was on a 5-hour flight, sitting next to a kid who was about 8 and his dad. The guy's wife and younger daughter were seated further up on the plane. The kid slept pretty much the entire flight, but as we were coming to land he went nuts and was yelling all sorts of stuff about Harry Potter. His dad was desperately trying to calm him down, and he was like, Hey, listen, very closely, and you can hear Mummy and Caroline talking up front. Can you hear Caroline? The kid just straight up goes into a demon voice and is like, No, Caroline is gone. The dad was mad and scolded him, but I had to turn away because I was losing myself in laughter. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. Huge thank you as always to my amazing patrons who can be seen on screen. Your help is invaluable to the continued growth and success of the channel. If any of you are interested in receiving the perks I showed at the start, or having your name on here, feel free to check out my Patreon. You can find it in the description. If there's a story you would like me to read, just send it to my email or drop it to my Reddit. And if you liked the video, don't forget that you can do something amazing by liking and subscribing if you're new. Drop a comment if you are so inclined, and press the bell icon to be notified every time I post. You won't regret it. But for now, guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.